Right. Thank you everyone for joining. Today marks a fairly historic day in terms of the partnership we're announcing with New South Wales Waratahs. In August, we announced the historic reset of Australian rugby, whereby we're working with all our member unions, the Super Rugby clubs, to align high performance to get the best possible high performance outcomes, but also focus appropriately into the community and grassroots. So really excited to be here and the partnership that we're announcing today with New South Wales Rugby Union and the New South Wales Waratahs. So thank you very much.
Guys, we'll just jump in. Phil and Paul, if you can answer correct. Straight down the line. Journals on the slides. Cool, we'll jump into questions.
Before you got one on board, have you got any opposition from any other states at all?
Look, I think we've worked really closely with the member unions. It's been really important, I guess, to talk through the high performance benefits. But most importantly right now, it's actually building trust and credibility with our member unions, given where we're at. So having really productive conversations with our other member unions, and New South Wales Waratahs are the first, but hopefully we'll work through pretty swiftly with our other Super Rugby clubs.
For the average fan, what does this mean for Super Rugby and Rugby Australia, and what kind of impact?
Yeah, so for average supporters, it would look and feel very similar, but the alignment will be around how do we get the best possible outcome of our teams in gold, and our Super Rugby clubs will all be working closely together to get that best possible outcome. And historically, I think we've been very competitive across Super Rugby clubs and at different levels, which hasn't necessarily led to the best possible outcome for the national team. So for the average punter, it's around actually just aligning for the best possible outcome for our teams in goal, which will naturally lift and elevate the Super Rugby club performances.
When do you expect for at least high performance part for the other states to come on board?
We're working through it. I don't want to put a timeline on it. I think we've worked really closely with New South Wales Rugby Union, New South Wales Waratahs. Hopeful to have one or two come in pretty quickly. But in terms of timelines, it's hard to put an exact date on it. But I think there's certainly that intent to align, and there's agreement across all the Super Rugby clubs to get the alignment in terms of timing. And what that includes, given that the New South Wales Rugby Union and New South Wales Waratahs includes the commercial aspects and all things New South Wales Rugby or New South Wales Waratahs Rugby. So as we said in the statement, there's nuances across each Super Rugby club.
Prior to Super Rugby season, do you thinking that this new system will be up and running for the new season?
Well, we're in the market for the director of high performance role. So there's been commentary around we don't have the skills, and that's right, because a lot of the skills sit within the system more broadly, and we actually need to employ those roles. So we're hopeful that we'll get more progress before the Super Rugby club. But in terms of what that means and the depths of that, it's quite difficult to answer that as we sit here today. But it's a very big day today for us in terms of the partnership and the first steps towards actually rubber hitting the road in terms of actually delivering on what we said we intended to.
Just on a day-to-day basis, particularly kind of come to Super Rugby season, what does it mean? Does it mean that the national coaches will come in? Does it mean that you guys have the ability to hire and fire coaches? How does it all work?
Yeah, so we're working through in terms of the decisioning frameworks. We've done a lot of that work. There's few nuances again, but day to day, it won't be any different given how close we are to the Super Rugby season. But as we go through the process of integration, that's when we'll see more, I guess, decisioning coming from the centre, but in absolute collaboration with what we're setting up with New South Wales.
As Paul, from a Waratahs perspective, why was this, you've sort of seen opposition from Reds and Brumbies in particular, why was this sort of a no-brainer for you guys to get on board and sort of so quickly sort of integrate with this sort of centralisation?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good question. Essentially, it's a bit like the shampoo ad, right? It's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen. So for us, the reason it was a no-brainer, we 100% agree the strategy has to change. So holistically, we bought into the fact that we believe that centralisation or the integration, particularly of the high-performance model, which also includes the commercial aspects, will actually drive better outcomes both on and off the field. So that for us is the reason we've signed up. We've actually had a really strong working relationship with Rugby Australia to get us to this point today. We think that some of those things where we need to get a bit more of the detail of the day-to-day side of things, but we're really comfortable with the fact that we think we're going to get better outcomes both on and off the field, and it's going to drive a better commercial response. And with the headwinds that the game's facing at the moment, we think that's a really important sort of leadership position to take.
How much of a leap of faith is it for? Like you said, you don't have the actual detail yet. The head of high performance still to be employed by Rugby Australia. This is an enormous step off for New South Wales.
Look, I think, not that I want to talk in metaphors today, but, the old saying, if you build it, they will come. Look, effectively, we do believe that the structure will follow the strategy. And so for us, we've been working very closely with Rugby Australia in my 4 years here. So we know how high performance works. We know the areas that we think we can improve on, particularly that collaboration piece, and just getting better at taking some of that tension out of the Super Rugby Australia language, and actually thinking, well, we do know that once the Wallabies perform really well, we know that that has a massive trickle-down effect. So I don't think it's actually that big a leap of faith. From our perspective, we think we have trust in Rugby Australia. I think Phil's demonstrated to us that there is a plan. We're working through exactly what that looks like for our club, and we're hopeful that by working together, we're going to get a much better outcome than 5 clubs working separately.
So what role can you play to help appease the tension that's no doubt in some of the other?
Look, I think for us, from a New South Wales Rugby and Waratahs perspective, taking this really massive step to be the first club, or the first cab off the rank, is really important. We want to be able to work really closely, get some quick wins to demonstrate that it can actually work and it does have an impact. So for us, that's what we're doing.
And what about if the head of high performance says 3 of your key players has to go to another union?
Well, fortunately, we've got a decent roster. We're locked and loaded next year. That concept of what that looks like nationally is probably more of a conversation for our young generation of players coming through. And I guess, when I first started, I used to get a bit upset with the media occasionally where they'd say, former Waratah players now gone here, former New South Wales Pathway Junior went to there. We can only have 38 players in our top squad. So actually part of the role of New South Wales, being the largest and the oldest provincial union, is to develop talent for the whole game in Australia. So we accept that. We clearly recognise that one of the things we always want to get better at is choosing the kids that'll be tomorrow's superstars, but we also fulfil a role in helping support the game across Australia and populating other Super Rugby clubs. We don't like to see anyone go, but effectively we know that's the role of a union such as New South Wales.
So why should other clubs trust this process, I guess, given the last few years, albeit before you came on board, but the financial struggles, the struggles on the field, why would other clubs want to pass on their control?
Yeah, and then that's the big challenge. I mean, we need to build that trust, and then trust doesn't happen overnight. This is the first step. What's really important, and I've talked a lot about, is actually just connection and unity. And right now, it's more important than ever for the whole game to come together to solve for the game of rugby in Australia. And I think it's been a really sensible approach and discussions with New South Wales Rugby Union to be the first Super Rugby club. We need to build that trust, and we're the first ones to put up our hands and say, we need to put the right capability into RA to actually drive this system. But most importantly, we need to have that influence and leverage to employ those people. And so it's a really important step today. To your question, we need to build that trust over time.
I understand one of the big concerns for the Brumbies in particular is potentially that they'll be relocated. Can you give a guarantee that they wouldn't? Is that one way that you could get them on board?
Yeah, well, we've already given that guarantee, so that's already been committed to the Brumbies, and so and I've got a really close relationship with Chair Matt Nobbs and Phil Thompson, the CEO, and we're making good progress. So it's been a little bit noisy in the media, but I do feel like since the World Cup and over the last couple of weeks, we've made some better progress than where we were maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. So a lot to do, but I do feel fairly optimistic around the direction we're going.
Phil, can you have that trust with Hamish Manzier as chair currently?
Well, that's not for me to answer. As CEO, I think we've got the appropriate governance around the game, and I think this is a really good step forward.
Do you feel like you have the ability at the moment, though, as a new chair, not so new CEO, to be able to kind of implement what you're wanting, though, with the current board in place?
Yeah, I mean, we're making good progress across the strategic direction. We announced this in August. This is the first step. And as I said, I'm very optimistic, and I think we're making good progress.
Well, we pushed financially to the brink so that it just, was a foregone conclusion that you had to jump on board.
No, certainly not. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's a challenging time to be running professional rugby and community rugby. I mean, the drain on resources is one way to look at it, but our goal as a consolidated entity is to try to pump as much money into community rugby as we possibly can. So if you think about this particular proposal, we actually get to ring fence New South Wales rugby. So it gets to focus solely on the community game. Last year we spent $6 million on developing the game in New South Wales. So from a professional perspective, moving back into the new stadium, there's no doubt about it. We would love to have had a larger crowd, which impacts our financials. But I certainly wouldn't use the language financial brink. We've just said there's certainly been some strong headwinds in that space, and we just got to be sensible about how we deal with it. So we're always looking at greater opportunities for revenue. This is just a perfect opportunity to try to use that strategy I talked about before and then turn that into some sort of practical solution for rugby in New South Wales. So I think we get a good outcome.
In your opinion, can rugby in Australia thrive unless the other states come on board?
Look, I think rugby in Australia will thrive, and Rugby Australia will do their darndest to try to make sure that everyone comes on board. Will it work if there's only one club that's first? I think, as I mentioned before, it's a work in progress. We've got to be able to demonstrate that this works. It works on the field for performance, and it works off the field commercially. So if we can demonstrate that, I think most definitely the other clubs, we'd like to think, will take the same position as us and get on board.
Phil, how long do you think Wallabies fans can sort of have to wait for the successes and the benefits of this new system?
Well, I've said it's not going to be overnight. I do think that it's a step forward. I keep going back to the fact that the most important aspect across rugby in Australia at the moment is connection and unity and coming together. And we've left our rugby fans really disappointed after the Rugby World Cup, and we've got a lot of trust to rebuild. And this is the first step. To Paul's point, we actually need to deliver now, and the integration needs to be successful for others to come in. I've never shied away from the fact that it's a challenge, and we're up for it, and we need to come together as a game.
So you're confident we can sort of be competitive against the Lions?
Yeah, it's less than 2 years away, and we've certainly got the talent. I think we need to get the talent playing at their absolute best. Once we bring together the best 23 players across the country, I think we're very competitive, and we saw that in patches throughout the year. We've seen that in patches over the last 3 years. How do you do that for 80 minutes week in, week out to beat what will be a pretty good British and Irish Lions team coming here in 25. So a lot of work to do between now and then. But I've always said that Australian sport produces some of the best athletes in the world. How do we ensure that we have those athletes playing rugby in Australia and available to the Waratahs?
Phil, on that topic, how closely are you bringing the players along on this kind of change? Given you've got Miguel Martin Tuasi having a coffee with the Roosters this week, the NRL is saying they'll give salary cap exemptions if they poach your players. How much are you bringing the players along to give them a sense of the path?
Yeah, the players are a critical part of this journey. I think we talk about building trust and credibility across the ecosystem. I think building trust and actually regaining that trust with the player group is actually really important at the moment. So I'm constantly talking to the senior players in the Wallabies to ensure that they're clear on the journey that we have. With the runway we have, and I know it's not far away with the British and Irish Lions in 25 and World Cup in 27, it should be pretty exciting for them to stand up and be a part of it.
Well, what do you make of this talk about losing a couple of your big guns?
Look, I think not all the Wallabies are back in training just yet, so we're keeping in contact with them when they're coming back. One of the things, whether they were in the Australian A side or whether they were playing for the Wallabies, to a T, everyone had a fantastic overseas European experience. Game aside, where I think that everyone acknowledged that there's still a lot of work to be done, but that opportunity that rugby provides for people to go overseas and compete in a Rugby World Cup is something that it's a bit like the visa rate, isn't it? That money can't buy those sorts of experiences. So, of course, there'll always be opportunities, but I think one of the massive value propositions for rugby is that international opportunity to have that experience, and that's certainly one of the key drivers for us when we have a conversation with all our players.
No timeline on sexualisation. What about timeline of the high-performance manager? And have you determined whether or not you want it to be a high-performance role or a director of rugby role, or is it still?
No, so we've been really clear around the JD. So it is a director of high performance, and given we've got a vacancy with head coach and pretty much all our Wallaby management now, Wallaby coach and that Wallaby environment will report into the director of by performance within that domain, and we'll be really clear around structure and perimeter and what is captured within that JD. And so I think structurally we had a really good opportunity to reset and ensure that there's the appropriate discipline within Rugby Australia to get the best possible success. Not just at the Wallaby level and teams in gold level, but a big part of this is actually ensuring we've got the appropriate focus and attention in the community game. And so with New South Wales Rugby Union, focused all on the community and participation in grassroots. It's a benefit to the community game as well as alignment of the high performance aspect.
And sorry, the next month is when?
So we're hoping we're deep in the recruitment process now. Certainly before Christmas, I'd like to be making an announcement around director of high performance. Equally, also making an announcement around what the recruitment process looks like for the head coach. Because whilst we do have time through to July when we play our next test, we know that the available coaches and the best possible coaches on the market get snapped up reasonably quickly after World Cup. So there is time, however, there is urgency to land both roles.
And you don't mind the Wallabies coach being announced next year?
No. As long as we get the best possible candidate, I'm less concerned around the timeline of that. I think it's about getting the best candidate for head coach, and the best candidate for head coach also then brings a really strong assistant coaching team and structure around them, because it's not just around the head coach. The head coach is critical, but how do you get the best people in the director of high performance role as well as the head coach to then attract the best talent around the world to come and coach the national team? So it's not, I know a lot of focus goes on head coach, but the head coach needs to be able to create a culture, but also attract the best possible talent to come through within the environment.
Realistically, when you think you'll make that coach announcement, like do you have sort of deadline in your mind that you want it done before a certain?
Ideally, and without committing to the timeline, I'd say ideally certainly before the start of Super Rugby. We certainly don't want to have a lot of distractions through processes going into Super Rugby. So I think that, without putting a timeline on it, although I am, I think that, ideally before Super Rugby.
Phil, what's the future of the game if you don't pull this off? If you don't get the 5 mile year after?
I'm still pretty optimistic about the game, and to those that were in Europe, you see how strong and healthy rugby is globally. We've certainly had our challenges locally at a Wallaby level, but there's and Super Rugby level. However, participation and grassroots and community rugby's been really strong and continues to grow. So at the moment, we just want to keep coming back to the fact of how do we connect the professional game to the community game, and I think that's where that disconnect has caused a lot of unrest, and so part of this is actually trying to bring together the two aspects.
If it doesn't come off, where does that leave the game in terms of the governance?
So I think the key here is getting a more successful national team. That drives interest of those that don't follow rugby and those that are questioning whether they want to be involved in rugby, and so. You look through the history of when Australia's done well at a Wallaby level, it drives interest into the game, it drives commercial interest into the game, and it brings the game together. And this is around getting a better high performance outcome as well as more laser focus on community.
So just going back to that sort of tension between the league and union, is it kind of an old school way of thinking that they keep being pitted against each other? Like, is there any space that they can actually work together?
Yeah, so I've consistently said that we can coexist, and to the differentiating aspects that rugby has to our other codes of AFL and rugby league and the international component. I genuinely believe the more boys and girls that experience rugby and the culture of rugby, the better our game will be. And so if a boy or girl's playing rugby league or AFL on a Sunday, I'm less concerned as long as they're playing rugby on a Saturday, and I think it's really important. And I think when parents often ask me, should they focus on one sport? I think focus on as many sports as you can. I genuinely think that the culture of rugby and what rugby provides is a differentiator for our code, and I'm pretty passionate about that.
Could you ever get to like a practical point of, say, like tickets, if you bought tickets to one, you got tickets to another? Like, could you ever practically work together?
Yeah, well, I haven't had those conversations with my peers of the other codes, but it's a bit like scheduling, and we end up going head to head with our big test match on a Saturday night at 7:30 against a big league match 7:30 on a Saturday night against a big AFL match, and it's actually we've got sports lovers that love all codes, and so how we actually create free space. And we played the game at Marvel Stadium a couple of years ago on a Thursday night, and it was one of the most successful test matches we've run. So, very open to all those conversations around how do we provide greater access.
And first, Brumbies, what's needed to break bread and make sure that they come along the journey?
Well, probably to the earlier comments around trust, and I think that the comment around the security of the Brumbies remaining in Canberra and the security around IP, which we've given. So I think that now it's just about working through what a structure looks like and what it means from a day-to-day management. But overlaying and underpinning all of that's building trust, and we've got a lot of work to do.
It's been described as a takeover from the Brumbies, so how have you been able to walk them back from that sort of commentary?
Well, we don't see it as a takeover. We see it as integration and partnership and alignment. And I think some of those concerns around the location of the Brumbies and the commercial elements is said as a takeover, but we don't view it as that. I mean, at the end of the day, our member unions and the community own rugby, not Rugby Australia, and that's a really important point to make. And we're here to do the best we possibly can for rugby in the country, and that's about driving the high performance elements as well as looking after our community.
And Jim, I guess from our perspective, it hasn't felt like it's been a takeover. We've sat down from the very beginning, worked through the strategy, worked through what the implications were, and then I think, again, in good faith and good trust, we've actually got to a landing where both parties should be pretty happy with the way we're going to move forward. So it hasn't felt like a takeover from our perspective.